Well,
This conference will now be recorded.
good morning, everybody. This is the October 21st, 2024 meeting. The time is 9:01 a.m. and look forward to bringing the meeting here officially to order. Can we do a verification for quorum?
Yes. Jeff?
Here.
Lori?
Here.
Julie?
Here.
Annie?
Here.
Ed?
Here.
Kathy?
Here.
And Owen.
Here.
And staff in attendance today we have Chad Cook, Paul Lindsay, and myself, Stephanie Perkins.
Well, there you go. This is one of my first few meetings here, so I'm still trying to get the hang of this, but it looks like at this point we want to open the floor to any public input. If there's anybody in the public that would like to speak, if you can virtually raise your hand, try and keep any testimony brief so that we can get through it all. If there's anybody out there in the public at this point that would like to say anything, please do a little virtual hand thing. We'll call on you. Doesn't look like we have any hands raised. So I think then we're just going to move on to the action items. That's all right. It says I'm disconnected. Oh, I'm connected. Sorry about that, you guys. It said I was disconnected. Do I need to vote? Chad, I apologize. Do I need to vote for an adoption of the board meetings for July 22? Is that on me?
Sorry, Jeff, I was muted. Basically, so if there's no public input, we can move right into the action items section of the agenda. And that would essentially just be you would ask for a motion or make a motion to adopt each one of those minutes because we have the July scheduled board meeting. Then we had the follow-up at the 29th meeting. So that would be 3 motions, 3 sets of minutes, individual motion for each, individual vote for each. Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, well, in lieu of that, let's go ahead and do the adoption of the July 22, 2024 board meetings. Probably need to bring that to a vote. Would that be right, Stephanie?
Move to adopt.
Do we have a, yes, do we have a motion?
July 22nd board meeting minutes?
I'll second it.
Okay. Jeff?
Yes.
Lori?
Yes.
Julie?
Yes.
Annie?
Yes.
Ed?
Yes.
Kathy?
Yes.
And Owen.
Yes.
Looks like the motion or adoption has been approved. We'll move on to the next adoption of the July 29, 2024 board meeting minutes. Stephanie?
I'll motion for that one.
I'll second.
Okay. Jeff?
Yes.
Lori?
Yes.
Julie?
Yes.
Annie?
Yes.
Ed?
Yes.
Kathy?
Yes.
And Owen.
Yes.
Perfect. We'll move on to the adoption of the September 11, 2024 board meeting minutes. Is there a motion?
So moved.
This is Jeff. Okay.
I'll second.
Okay. Jeff?
Yes.
Lori?
Yes.
Julie?
I'm going to abstain since I wasn't there.
Okay. Annie?
Yes.
Ed?
Yes.
Kathy?
Yes.
And Owen.
Yes.
Perfect. I think the next thing is we're looking at the schedule for 2025. I think we can see the dates down there. Monday, January 20, Monday, April 21st, Monday, July 21st, and Monday, October 20th. It's kind of pairs similar to what we have had the last few years. So I'll I'll do a adoption of the 2025 quarterly board meeting schedule.
Can I discuss? Is anybody open to changing that to a Tuesday, or is it just me?
For me, it doesn't matter, Monday or Tuesday, but do we have to go through, Chad, do we have to go through the whole thing again and wait for the next quarter, or can we make that change here?
Oh, no,
Now.
so what I've got there on the schedule, what I put on the agenda is just a suggestion. So anybody can motion. I mean, if you want to, I would say keep it consistent, whichever day of the week you prefer. But yeah, if you wanted to motion that it would be, if we're talking about Tuesday, it would just be Tuesday, January the 21st, April the 22nd, July the 22nd, right? Just for the record. But no, there's nothing that says you can't do that at all. That's fine.
Well, the only reason I bring it up is just because I feel like Monday morning is like when you're trying to get set up, caught up, do everything, I don't want to be a problem.
That's not the first time I've heard that, Annie. That makes perfect sense.
Okay. Yeah. So I don't know. Do you guys care? I don't want to screw things up if this works for everybody. You know what I'm saying? So.
I think
Well,
we do it this way just because it's always been done this way. So Tuesdays, I think, are fantastic, Annie. It's a great recommendation.
And I will just add to, excuse me, as I'm looking at the calendar for next year, January 21st falls on a federal holiday. April 21st falls on Easter Monday. So both of those days fall on holiday type days anyways. So maybe moving it to a Tuesday is a good idea for next year.
Yeah. What do you
you
think?
beat me to that.
Julie, what do you say?
I'm good with that, Annie. I think we can do that.
Yeah, let's, if we're in agreement, pretty much, why don't we just modify that, Chad? That way we'll make sure we don't have any federal holidays. I was looking at quick calendar. It doesn't look like there's anything on Tuesdays, maybe one in November, which wouldn't affect us. So I will motion for an adoption for the 2025 quarterly board meeting schedule to be on Tuesdays, January 21st.
Still moved.
April, okay.
Oh,
Tuesdays
sorry.
on all of them. Yeah. No, I was going to say April 22nd, July 22nd, and October 21st for 2025. Those will all be Tuesdays.
Okay. So moved.
I'll second that.
Okay, Jeff,
Yes.
Lori,
Yes.
Julie,
Yes.
Annie,
Yes.
Ed,
Yes.
Kathy,
Yes.
and Owen.
Yes.
Okay, sounds great. It looks like the next thing would be to go over the old business, which would be the budget report. So I'll hand that over to Lindsay. Maybe
Paul's
I
just
won't.
Paul's just got to unmute real quick.
Oh, there you go. Mr. Lindsay, are you there with us? I don't see him, Chad. Do we want to skip over that one and move to the licensing report?
I see Paul logged in here. He might be having some issues. I'm also picking up some reverb feedback when we're all talking. So there might be something going on with the audio. He might have had to call in. We're also having some issues with our state computers today. I've been notified by IT, so that might have something to do with it. That reverb might be coming from staff computers. So I think Paul's probably having to call in and use his phone as audio, kind of like you've had to do in the past.
Right.
But if you wanted to move on and do the licensing and the rest of the reports, and then come back to the budget report,
Yeah.
that would be fine too. If you don't want to waste time.
Yeah. Let's go ahead and do that so we can get Paul back on the line here. We'll move on to the licenses and the AMC report. Chad, you are up, sir.
Yes, sir. Okay. So these numbers are reported as of the end of the last quarter, which was ending September 30th, 2024. And I think you all will probably pick up on the same trend that I did as we were running these reports. Currently, we have, as of September 30th, 2024, we have 602 active certified general appraisers, 613 active certified residential appraisers, and 125 active licensed appraisers, for a total of 1,340 active appraisers in Oregon as of September 30th. And if you look back at that report from 2019, 2020, 21, et cetera, it's looking like as of right now, we're essentially at a 5-year low for the number of licensees that we have. And that's not a huge surprise given what's active in the market right now, or not active, so to speak. So essentially, it's not a massively declining trend, but we do see our numbers dropping a little bit. And that's again going to be relevant to other discussions that you guys are hopefully going to have today. So as of right now, we have 1,340 active appraisers in Oregon. Inactive appraisers, we have 24 certified general inactive appraisers. We have 29 inactive certified residential appraisers and 17 inactive state licensed appraisers, for a total of 70 inactive appraisers. Essentially, our total licensee population at this point, well, as of September 30th, is about 1,410 appraisers. As of September 30th, we had 67 registered appraiser assistants actively pursuing their experience and education to become certified or licensed. And we had 95 registered AMCs in the state. And again, you'll see that both of those numbers are trending downward. I think a lot of it has to do with market activity or lack thereof. On the AMC side, I know that has a lot to do with competition and potential consolidation. As we've talked about that before. So yeah, overall across the board, it looks like we are looking at a somewhat declining trend, at least in the short term, which is going to play into Paul's budget discussion that we'll have a little bit later here after I finish the rest of these reports. Essentially, at this point, that covers the licensing report. Was that Kathy? Did I hear you?
Yeah. Can I ask a quick question? Do we know how many of those appraiser assistants have gone up into licensure status versus are just dropping out?
We can run reports on that. We didn't for the licensure report, but yeah, that would be something that we can figure out by running the number of new unique licenses that we've issued over the last, say, year, and then eliminating the ones that were obtained through reciprocity. The remainder would be anybody that tested in, which would be those assistants that moved up in the process.
Thank you.
So it's a roundabout way to calculate that, but yes, we can run a report and figure that out. If you want me to do that after the board meeting or have Paul do it, we can figure that out.
I think that would be great information to have, just so that we can know, do we have appraiser assistants that are continuing on in the process, or are they just dropping out because the process is taking them too long, or they've lost a supervisor, or kind of what that looks like?
Sure.
Yeah, I kind of agree with Kathy. I think that'd be some good statistics to know, quite honestly.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to have that information, Chad.
Sure.
I want to just be the silver lining person here because, Monday morning, it does look like the certified general numbers are going up, which looks good, right?
Oh, that's true.
So the only ones that are going down are residential and licensed, which does make sense, like you're saying, Chad, from the market. But right. I like seeing that even since 2020, we see a rise in certified generals. So yay. I mean, I think that's good. So anyway, I just wanted to point that out. So,
that is a positive, and it could indicate a shift into that higher licensure just as time goes on. Some of us certified residential folks making that move up into your arena. Yeah.
Sure. Would that be so to make that change, Chad, for the next quarter meeting to add that so we can see where the assistants are moving, trending toward either licensure or dropping out? We can kind of see that trend line.
I can make notes. The format of this report is such that might create too many columns and shift things over, and we'd rebuild the spreadsheet. But I can definitely make a note of that to report that in these numbers. And then Paul and I can work to figure that out after today's board meeting and shoot that all out to all of you as well, if you'd like.
That's be fantastic.
Sure.
You ready to move on to the enforcement report there?
Yes, sir.
All right.
Okay, so again, these numbers are developed as of September 30th, 2024. Last quarter, which was July 1 through September 30th, we closed 9 cases. As of September 30th, we had 92 open cases, of which we have 0 appraisal management company cases. So no cases currently open against appraisal management companies for any allegations of any kind. We have, the 92 cases that are open are all appraiser related. Of those 92, we have 6 where we are waiting for a response from the appraiser. They're at some point in that response notification time period where they have a time period to respond to the allegations and submit documentation, things like that. Of the 92 cases that are currently open, 4 are before you guys today for approval or ratification of a settlement. We have 4 investigations currently in process, and I believe 2 of those are just about wrapping up. And then the remainder would be 78. We have 78 cases that are pending assignment and investigation moving forward. Of those 78 that are pending, I believe at last count it was something like 20 some odd cases were related to Fannie Mae allegations. So within that 78, there's a good chunk that will be trying to triage and look at and see if there's any commonalities. We're working to try and address these cases in the most efficient way possible. And if it looks like an appraiser has potentially 2 cases open at the same time that are relatively similar, rather than making that person wait a significant amount of time for case 1 to close and then moving on to case 2, we're trying to address those together so that the appraiser has the information they need to keep those things from continuing to happen. So that's something that you folks have probably seen in the Enforcement Oversight Committee, is that there are appraisers with a couple of cases at the same time, and we're presenting those together. Not that the cases are identical or are related, but the issues within those cases being related means that we really should be addressing that again for the appraisers, not only for the appraiser's benefit of knowledge, but in order to protect the public and make sure that those things are not happening out in the wild, so to speak, over and over again, with the appraiser not being made aware of stuff that they could otherwise maybe change through education. So that's 78 pending investigation. As of September 30th, 77 of our 92 cases are over 1 year old. And that again is the number that we're working really hard daily to try and reduce that down. All 4 of the cases before you folks today for ratification or approval are within or are that over 1 year mark. So right now our focus is getting those aged cases closed as soon as possible. And all 4 of your cases today that you'll be looking at for settlements are over a year old. All 4 of our active investigations, again, are those over 12-month cases right now. There would be certain circumstances that might change that. If something comes in that looks like it represents an immediate danger to the public safety or trust, something like that, that's not necessarily related to a procedural error, but very clearly looks like this is something that absolutely cannot continue and is of important enough severity that we need to bump this to the front of the line. Currently, we don't have anything going on like that right now, which is a good sign for appraisers out there, that we don't have any urgent, high priority or high profile cases. A lot of what we're dealing with would appear to be errors as opposed to intentional misstatements and things like that. So the 4 investigations in process, as I said, are over a year old, and we have 69 of the 77 are currently awaiting investigation. And that pretty well covers the enforcement report. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Chad. Question: there was a caller that's joined. I don't know if it's pertinent, but do we want to see if by chance Paul can talk at this point for the
good
budget
question
report?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Paul.
Hello? Okay, I am on through my phone now.
Perfect.
Computer's not working.
Well, we'll let you have the floor, Paul, for the budget report.
Okay. Okay, 1 second. Let me get this up. Okay, on their budget report, I did set a memo in with this one because of some items that we see are happening with the funds. So I'm was a little concerned. So I wanted to let you guys be aware of what I see and what, as a budget, and with Chad, what planning to do to help this. As Chad said with the license report, our funding is coming in lower than what we predicted. So for now, all we're going to do is do all we can do to cut back on costs, which include us changing our figure of our office, our phone lines, streamlining our database online, anything we can do to protect ourselves for the future. Never been this agency this long with the work we had this fall like this, but I did look back in records. It has happened before. So all they did was tighten down on their spending habits, and that's what I'm going to do and keep you guys informed. Preparing to build the next budget cycle, and we will also do that at a lower amount to protect ourselves. But I'll keep an eye on it and keep you guys informed if I see any major trends. And that's it. Chad, you might want to add more if you like.
You're muted, Chad.
Sorry about that. I think that memo fairly well covered the situation. Essentially, this is all related to licensure volumes. That's the entirety of where the board's budget comes from. Again, I would imagine, and I didn't work for the board at this time, but if you all remember 2007, 8, 9, somewhere around that time frame, we had another residential hiccup where the market was not as active. And a lot of appraisers opted to leave the industry. Following that, we had another boom. And so that's, those of us that have been around long enough know that real estate is very cyclical, especially on the residential side. So while the numbers are declining, I would imagine that this is not, again, I don't have a crystal ball, but I would imagine that this is not going to be a permanent situation. That our licensure numbers generally tend to increase and decrease with the amount of work that's out there. That circumstance might change a little bit with the advent of additional other programs that allow other paths to licensure. But at this point, we just need to be mindful of eliminating any expenses that we don't absolutely need. And so that's why we initially started with reducing that office footprint, because that's one of our larger expenses. And given that we are working remotely about 80% of the time, given each staff member's schedule, we don't need the size of office that we currently have. We can downsize a little bit and save a considerable amount of money just right there on the hard costs. The other thing being our legacy phone system at the office, the physical office, is one of the oldest probably in Oregon. And it's also, again, with the advent of voice over internet protocol technologies, also known as soft phones, other technology things that are actually cheaper, there are efficiencies that we can put in place and eliminate some of these older pieces of tech, outdated ways of thinking, file storage methodologies, and it'll increase our efficiencies, but at the same time, cost us less in the short term. So that's really where we're focused. Again, I don't see this as a permanent trend. But it is going to be ongoing for a little bit here. I would imagine at least maybe the next year, if not the next coming full biennium.
Can I ask just a clarification question for my own sake?
Absolutely.
Can you shed some light into what goes into revenue line 1115 application fees? And the reason that I ask is because, of course, as you've highlighted, renewal fees are down in all categories pretty substantially. It looks like we're on pace for application fees. So will we see additional licensure or potential additional licensure revenues out of that application fees line item? Is that a lead indicator of new application fee or new licensure fees, or is that just a red herring?
I am trying to look for the budget line that to go ahead and
Chad,
answer.
I can explain that. That line item is also, it looks at when you're doing upgrades on licensing. So it might not be that we're getting more new people. It's just that they're upping their licensing. We could break it down more, maybe track it that way to see what's going on. That's for any new AMCs, new appraisers, any upgrades, anytime they're changing anything on their previous license. But we can break it down more to verify exactly what it is. And keep an eye on that line item, since we could probably look better at that.
Good question.
Yeah, thank you.
Is there anything else, Chad, on the as far as the budget report or anything else, or are we ready to move toward the approval of board orders?
I don't have anything else for you related to those items right now.
All right. Well, then I say we move on over here to the board orders. And again, Chad, I'm new to this, but I think I'm to read the case number and pass that, vote for a motion to approve. Is that how?
Correct. And you'll notice, board members, that there is one of the respondents, and there is the same in 2 cases. That is a dual order. Jeff, I would recommend that you request a motion that includes both of those case numbers together, so that we don't contradict in terms of voting.
Okay.
So that you'll recognize them when you get there. But yeah, I would say call those 2 out together, because that is a one order for 2 cases.
All right, perfect. All right, well, so we'll move on to the approval of board orders. As you can see down here, we have a case number 20-2440, action taken education. We have a motion to approve the order.
Moved.
I'll second that.
Okay. Jeff?
Yes.
Lori?
Yes.
Julie?
Yes.
Annie?
Yes.
Ed?
Yes.
Kathy?
Yes.
And Owen.
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, we'll move on to the next case number. It's 20-2444. Action to be taken is education. I have a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
I'll second.
Jeff?
Yes.
Lori?
Yes.
Julie?
Yes.
Annie?
Yes.
Ed?
Yes.
Kathy?
Yes.
And Owen.
Yes.
Okay, so the next 2 cases are joined together. So I'll read them off, then we'll make a motion to approve both of them at one time. It's case number 20-2446, education, and order number 21-2490, again, education. They're conjoined together, so I'd like to motion to approve those as one.
Moved.
This is Jeff. I'll motion to approve.
Okay. Jeff?
Yes.
Lori?
Yes.
Julie?
Yes.
Annie?
Yes.
Ed?
Yes.
Kathy?
Yes.
And Owen.
Yes.
Okay, thank you all. Looks like it's time to move to the administrator's report, and that is back to you, Chad.
Thank you, Jeff. So we touched on this just a little bit here a second ago. As of right now, we are in the ongoing process of trying to identify inefficiencies, things that are redundancies, things that are unnecessary expenses, or things that we could maybe do in a different way that are less expensive. That includes, again, the office footprint, a lot of our equipment. Given that we're downsizing our physical size, we don't need as much equipment. Given the shift towards mostly digital record keeping, we also don't need as much paper and printing supplies and space to store those things, all of which, especially at the state archives level, cost a significant amount of money over time. So that would be essentially this first update item, is that we are continuing to identify things. We will be shifting to what we call soft phones here in the very near future. I've kind of got several things in process. We've actually signed our new lease to reduce our office space by about 30% or so. A little less than 30%, but our space rent is going to be roughly 30% reduced. So that's a pretty good chunk of change that we're saving right there off the bat. And again, because of our outdated, more or less antiquated phone system, we'll be getting rid of the physical office phones, moving towards the digital soft phone technology. That is in process. We're hoping to have a cutover date with that service around the end of the year. Let's see, what else have we identified? So the space, the equipment, we are currently scanning all of our physical records into digital format, so that we're not going to be needing to send those to the physical state archives. If you want to put a picture in your head of what that looks like, it's, if you've seen Indiana Jones and that great big warehouse where they store all of the crates and things, that's essentially, in my mind, what I see the state archives as. And it's expensive to take up space in that building or buildings. So if we can eliminate those things through easy, simple technology that we already have, why would we not do that and eliminate that expense? Secondary to that, some of the other efficiencies that we're trying to build in for not only staff, but licensees moving forward in the future, of which I am one, by the way, is that we've continued to have our database host build out an online portal for license applications, document submission that's related to license applications or renewals, and payments and things like that. Sorry about that. That's my personal phone. And so we're in the process right now. I believe we should be able to start beta testing that either late this week or potentially next week sometime, and then go live once we've verified that that's working according to plan, and that we all understand how it's working. That'll go live for licensees here, hopefully sometime before the end of the year, and that will make the licensing renewal process much simpler. In that currently you all have to go to the website, download the PDF application form for either a new license or a renewal, fill that out, and then email it to our online license application email address. Not that that's the most complicated thing in the world, but we can make it simpler and make it a little more streamlined and move our technology and our abilities up into the 21st century here. And that should be finalized and live here if everything goes according to plan before the end of the year. The third thing that I wanted to talk about, and we are moving through our agenda very quickly here at the October meeting, folks. I'm actually glad to see that. Is the grant that we applied for earlier this year that you all authorized me to apply for on behalf of the agency. And we were granted the funds from the State Appraiser Regulatory Assistance grant that is offered by the Appraisal Subcommittee. We did receive that grant award. We're now in the process of writing policies to govern our funds management of federal funds. This is the first time that the board has gone through anything like this. So we are currently writing policies to make sure that we're in compliance with federal reporting standards and cash handling, things like that. We are being set up with the payment dispersal system through the appraisal subcommittee. So there are a few few moving targets and balls up in the air, so to speak, with the grant money. But ideally, our first reporting period, I believe, is at the end of this month. So we should be having a lot of those things come to fruition in the next, say, 9-10 days. And moving forward, what we'll be doing is developing the contract that will be then offering. Anybody that's members of the public here listening in, we will be posting notice of a request for proposals on the ACLB website We'll probably also send that out to all of our licensees, any of you that are our licensees that we have emails for. And this would be related to primarily, because the board's issue for the most part in terms of our compliance side is the age of cases. We will be focusing most of that grant funds on compliance consulting. So not necessarily folks doing investigations, but assisting investigators in research and that front end stuff. And we'll be asking for proposals from the public and anybody else that wants to submit one. Once that's posted to the website, there will probably be a 30-day period or so where we will be accepting those proposals. And then the board will make a decision after that point moving forward. So we are just getting rolling on that process, and I'm really looking forward to starting to use that grant money to the board's benefit, and getting some of these cases addressed and dealt with, so that the public can rest easy, and also so that appraisers can have the information that they need, that they've been waiting on, to be quite honest with you, to keep things from happening in the future. Again, that's where it seems like we've all decided to take the board's enforcement activities is on the side of education as opposed to punitively, when at all possible. So that would be a big piece of what that grant is going to be used for. And be on the lookout. Please do check back regularly on the board's website to see when that request for proposals is submitted or is posted. And we'll be starting to accept those proposals for consulting. And lastly, this is a reminder mostly for the board members, but also staff in attendance if you haven't necessarily completed your required trainings. State service, state employment requires, there are certain sets of classes that we're all required to take on an annual basis related to information security training, maintaining a professional workplace, things like that that are mandated through the state service. And so I wanted to make sure that all of you are aware that that deadline is looming as of December 31st for the 2024 trainings. We will all need to have those. I believe there's 2 classes, and it should be available in Workday. If any of you have trouble logging into Workday or getting access to the learning portion of that website, please reach out and talk to me. It should be a relatively straightforward fix or access issue. But those classes, I believe one of them is about 40 minutes, and I think the other one is 30. So they're not a huge time commitment, but they are required, statutorily required for volunteers as well as state employees. And ladies and gentlemen, that essentially covers my administrator's report. I'm happy to answer any questions. If there's something that I missed that you want me to cover, I'm happy to address it now.
Hey, you're doing great, Chad. A lot of good things happening. I think if I'm not seeing any hands for anything, we're probably going to move on to general discussion, which might take a little bit of time here. Over the last few meetings, we've been talking about PREA and some things like that that we've been discussing, doing some additional classes, learning, and going through some items. So I wanted to try and go through, if anybody has questions as remote, anything that they'd like to discuss about. At this point, the floor is open as far as for PREA or anything else that's pertinent to any of the members. I have some feelings on it, and I figured I would talk about it, but I could go first or let any of the other board members go. It's up to you. So I'll pause. Okay, so I don't see any hands, so I'm going to go ahead and move forward on what I was going to say then. I've looked at PREA quite a bit, and I know that as we did this, we had some training back in September, and it is one of those things where PREA, I actually learned quite a bit. I was pretty taken aback about how thorough it was, pleasantly surprised, and I feel like, and this is just me from my side, and I'm coming from somebody that's trained 10 appraisers, of which a few way back almost a decade ago didn't do their things, but out of the last 7 years, I've had, I think, 8 appraisers that I've gone through the training supervisory program that have gone from everything, and they still work with my company. And I look at, and I look at my PREA. I look at PREA and how good that is, and I looked at the things and I thought, my trainees would have learned more through that program, through the syllabus that I saw, than what they learned from me. And I'm talking about from an academia standpoint. What they'll never learn through that is the experience of being in the field, smelling a house, being able to identify certain things that you just don't know until you get out there. And in the last 6 or 7 years that I've had my trainees become licensed and certified and still be here with the company, is that I get questions every day from them on lots of different items. And you only get those questions as you go through the field. And I try to square the circle of how PREA can work in the system, why it was created, what its purpose is, how it will protect the public interest and the service, of which I on the board have basically vowed to do, right, is to protect the public interest. So with that being said, I think there's times in life where things are very easy. You know, this is right or wrong. This is yes or no. You know, you take a left or a right. But I feel like a lot of times we kind of live life in a 51-49% type of thing. And that's where I kind of find myself on PREA. And after learning all these items and thinking about it, I feel like there's a way that as a board that we can protect the public interest, but that we can also offer this program in Oregon. This is just my personal feeling on this of how I feel about it, which is, and the only way I can kind of get myself there is basically, and I'm not doing this at this moment, but it would be to propose some type of amendment that would allow at some point in time, anybody that gets a license, be it through PREA, be it through regular supervisory, that there's a 12-month type of auditing period that they could be asked to look at some of their experiences. And what that can do, just like if you were, as a supervisor, you turn on a log and you have things that are looked at and then you go through this. Here, we can't do that with PREA, but we could possibly have some way where after a year, everybody, I'm not talking about PREA, so I don't want to single out just PREA, but everybody from here forth has a log that the state could audit, and then we could look at that to see if they've had the appropriate experience. And I can only see that as a way forward. So for me, I'd like to see something like that, but I would like to open the floor for any other discussion about this for the board members to see what their feelings are. If there's anybody out here that's interested in talking about that. That would be you, Lori.
Great, thanks. Oh, it was just a quick question. Chad, doesn't the board already have authority to audit at any time?
That is correct. Yeah. That's part of the board's authority, and it's also a continuing authority, regardless of active or non-active status of licensure. That the board can go back and request records and things basically at any time within 5 years or so of that activity taking place. So I in terms of what Jeff is saying here, I think that's not a bad idea to specifically discuss within licensure. And as of right now, sorry to word salad at you folks, it's Monday. As of right now, our current licensure process for the traditional path includes an audit of that licensee's work product. So with that application from a new licensee, they're submitting their experience log to the board, and staff is selecting between 1 and 3 files to examine to verify that at least one of those files meets USPAP requirements, the minimum requirements, and satisfies our Oregon administrative rules and statutory obligations and things like that. So we do currently audit new licensees within the application process before approving them to take the exam. The shift that we're talking about here would be, I don't know if it's a shift, but it would essentially be in addition to that process on the traditional side, after the people are approved for their exams and or pass the exam after they've been in practice for a year, that the board could then go back and look at the work within that first year. And yes, we do currently, as of right now, without changing a single rule, have that authority as a board. You all have that authority to request work files from anybody at any time.
Oh, okay. And now we've got Kathy. Go ahead.
Jeff, I like your idea about the audit, the follow-up audit. I don't necessarily think that's a bad idea to do with regards to just following up. I think if I heard you correctly, you said regardless of their path to licensure, correct? So whether it be Perea or if they're going through the traditional path, that they would have that opportunity within the first year to have files audited. Are you suggesting that we mandate an audit or just it could be audited during that first year?
If I were to make the motion, for me, I would want a mandate, at least an audit for everybody within that 1 year, that they have that look. That would suffice for me, that the work has been, we can see what they've done outside of Korea, and they have some experience in the state. So we're protecting the state's interest, the public's interest, that they are competent, not in Perea, but in doing field work. And then on the flip side, we're not singling out the Perea program and saying it's only you guys. I don't think that's, I'm not really sure if that's, I'm not going to say the word legal, but I'm not sure that that's something we could do anyway. So that's why I'm saying anybody from here forth has that potential audit.
Okay, then Chad, I would have a follow-up question for you. Do we have resources available to actually add that as a requirement? I mean, do we have staff that can actually do that? I mean, we're already backlogged in our, cases that we're looking at. Do we have the ability to do something like that? Or is that something that the board could do an audit on or something like that?
Chad, that question was directed toward you. You're muted.
Okay. So yes, this is a decision-making board. All of you are voting decision-making board members. And as you know, that it's been frequent practice, at least in the last 4 or 5 years or so, that occasionally board members will step in and do those pre-licensure audits during the application process to verify that the folks that staff are approving to take their exams meet the minimum use pack requirements and things like that. So yeah, that wouldn't necessarily be restricted to staff only. It is a stretch on the resources, but really at this point, everything is a stretch on the resources. Given the fact that we now will, moving forward into 2025, be able to be using that appraisal subcommittee federal grant assistance funds, that I did earmark some of that to go towards different areas of the board's programs. Primarily, that's where we'll be using it, is in the compliance side. But essentially, if we're freeing up resources on the compliance side with contract work, that could potentially free up staff to do some more of those not pre-licensure audits. It would be a post-licensure audit process. So the process and the audit and the experience verification, that process would look identical, regardless of whether it's before the licensing exam, after the licensing exam, within 12 months of licensure. And given that we currently have board members assisting with those occasionally, I see no problem with continuing that in the future on that side of the audit process.
Thank you, Chad. Annie, you are up next, and I'll get you Owen after.
Okay. Yeah, Jeff, I share your 5149 thing. I had the same experience. So the idea of this post audit, do you visualize doing something like focusing, because it seems like the concern is specifically on field work, which I agree with you on. Would there be a way of focusing the audit specifically on that? Is that something that you would visualize as doing? And I was thinking also, what would be involved in, as part of that audit, bringing them to a meeting like this and then being able to sort of do almost like an oral audit. When I did my doctorate, you had to defend your dissertation to your committee. And maybe something like that where you could ask questions to get an oral response from the appraiser in terms of what their experience was in terms of fieldwork. Do you see what I'm saying? I'm just trying to think of what that audit could look like and how it could be made the most expedient, how it could be made expedient.
In terms of the audit versus that, so what you're kind of talking about would be a panel discussion, yeah? Sort of like how I got my job with the board, which was a panel interview, multiple panel interviews that, question, answer, period, kind of thing like that. As far as an audit goes, the panel review would probably require a committee as opposed to, say, the full board sitting in on a panel discussion. Just like we have an enforcement oversight committee, that might warrant forming an additional committee that relates to post-licensure examination, or I'm not sure exactly what you would want to call that. That's, again, that the board has lots of options. That's one of those brainstorm ideas that could potentially be put in place, would be post-licensure board examination, or a review of some kind. That would probably rest solely on the shoulders of you board members, and that would essentially, again, free up, that would not necessarily involve staff time for an audit. The goal here, from what I'm hearing, it seems like we want to make sure that we're giving licenses primarily to the people, not primarily, that we're only giving licenses to people that meet the minimum criteria and are competent to appraise the property they're appraising in the state. Other than gathering personal opinion, I'm not sure what a panel would accomplish post-licensure, other than if there are drastic problems, then bringing that to the attention of the administrator for potential. There could be we already have in place mentorship programs. There's compliance counseling on the enforcement side when we see things that have gone wrong, but they weren't intentional or severe. If that appraiser hasn't had any prior experiences with the board on the compliance side of things, we do currently also offer compliance counseling through board staff, the investigators, things like that. So there's a lot of ways that we could go about that secondary double check. An audit via board or staff would be one of them. Committee panel meeting, sort of like a job interview, would be another one. It's really going to depend on what type of resources each one of those things take and how much time you all are willing to devote to that process as well on the committee side.
Okay. Yeah. I don't know, Jeff, I was just interested in your thoughts too on that, if that's kind of not addressing what you were thinking, or you had some different idea, or Rolf.
Sorry, guys, I got a couple of basset hounds here. Got a little excited. Essentially, yes, it does. I'm not sure about a panel. I like the enforcement oversight, or I do audits as part of the board volunteering. Something like that's good. It might warrant, after that, a conversation with the applicant. Well, it would be a licensed appraiser at that particular moment, or certified. But essentially, it's just I don't know how we get around the experience part, but that we want to make sure that they're doing the public trust. And if we were to wait, as we've talked about in previous quarters meetings, to get people through the program and to see historical data, it might be 2 or 3 or 4 years before we get any relevant data on this. And I feel like this might be a better way for us to kind of control that narrative, to understand how that's coming. And as we look at the history of this, I voted against PREA, but having seen the classes and seen this, the learning more about the programs, it's never going to get the field experience, but I just want to be able to oversee, if we want to have that option to do that and not single them out over anybody that's gone the traditional supervisory method. Because, I mean, there's arguments that say PREA is better than supervisory. We could all argue that. I'm not going to get into that. Let's just make it so that we have the option to review anybody. A doctorate, panel for your doctorate, I think that might be a little much. Boy, I'd be nervous if you pulled me up and started talking to me about one of my appraisals. I'm like, oh no. But I think a quick audit by maybe a board member or staff, if we have something like that. There's not that many that come through every year from PREA and licensures. I mean, it's just not that many. But I think that we could handle that, and we could move on past this system and get it going to where, if that helps you, Annie, with what I was thinking there. Owen, you have had your hand up, sir. I'll defer the floor to you.
I love the idea, Jeff, of a follow-up audit. And my only question really is what the consequences might be if we found that wanting, right? If does that then have to become would a board member on that committee register a complaint against that appraiser? because at that point, like you've identified, they would be a licensed appraiser in the state of Oregon, right? So we can't do we change the way that we talk about licensure and make it provisional for a year so that it can be withdrawn if we find that lacking, which seems like a big administrative haul, or is there some other, and maybe Chad's feedback is what I need here. What would be the appropriate amount of recourse or feedback following a periodic check-in, which I agree is a wonderful idea with everybody in their first year?
So in terms of, and going back to Lori's point, I just wanted to address something. We do currently, as of right now, without changing a single rule or adding any language anywhere, have the ability to request files from any active, well, not even active, any appraiser in Oregon. Those of you on the call, myself as an inactive appraiser, anybody is subject to that notice and audit. As far as what that looks like for why are we doing it within the licensure process? Are we doing it to discipline appraisers, or are we doing it to point out things that need to improve and give those appraisers the tools to improve the things that need to improve that maybe weren't addressed in PREA because it's just not in the real, physical world of inspection and ANSI and all of the other fun things that we now get to deal with? The way that I would look at that is, and again, this would be something that I would need to look at the administrative rules and make sure that it goes in a way that doesn't contradict anything else that we already have in existence. But our current licensure process, the audit process for licensure, includes when you apply as a new appraiser, we request, just as a matter of course, 3 files. Not all 3 necessarily get examined. If we look at file number 1 and it meets the minimum standards for what we would call USPAP compliance and compliance with statute and rule, we don't look at numbers 2 and 3. We look, okay, we've verified that your work product or a representative sample is compliant. You're now approved to take your exam. So on the back side of things, I would and then if that first file does not quite meet standards, then we move on to file number 2 and file number 3. After that third audit, if we've seen consistent problems and feedback that's not changing the work product, at that point, the application for licensure is deferred, and the person either has the opportunity to dispute the audit findings with you as a board, or withdraw their application and reapply once they've made some necessary changes or taken some additional classes, things like that. On our post-licensure side, the way I would envision that without trying to make it punitive would be the same kind of an ordered process. We look at file number 1, or maybe we request 3 right out of the gate, 10.5 months after the person's been issued their license. And if that first file looks like it's compliant, there's no need to look at files number 2 and 3. There again, if file number 1 is not compliant, looking at number 2, drawing any commonalities that may exist between the files, if there are areas of non-compliance or potential non-compliance that are similar, giving the appraiser that information and allowing them to maybe modify their practices and come back to the audit for a third time, so that we can see the progression of that work product. If for some reason we don't pass after examining 3 of those files, and again, this would be post-licensure, at that point, we could recommend education. We could, and again, a lot of these, I'm not sure exactly how it would be written into rule. That's going to need to be an offline review process of the rules. But it could be an education process where we have identified there are a couple of holes in the education that you need. Here are some of the things that you can learn, or here are some classes that will teach you those things. There could be a mentorship process wherein the appraiser goes to work with another appraiser. Now, this would be separate from the supervisor trainee process. This is there's a list out there, in fact, of approved mentors. Now, these are people that the board, that we staff have examined and said that the work product of these individuals is such that they set a good example for others and have knowledge that could be useful to new people. We already use mentors. We haven't in a little bit yet, for a while now, but We do already have mentors that can act in right now in the case of compliance cases where we've found these 4 things wrong. We want this appraiser to go work with this mentor or find one of the mentors on our list of approved mentors. And that would be an independent agreement or relationship between that appraiser and that mentor, separate from, say, a supervisor trainee process where that's registered trainee, registered supervisor, but it's the same essential function where that mentor is filling in the gaps for the person that ran afoul of the minimum standards, and then coming back after the fact, and the mentor, as of right now, reports in on that activity and says, yes, we met this many times over these many months or these many weeks, and these are the results of the meetings, and this is the progression of the work product. The person has satisfied my expectations as a mentor. That's somewhat a little bit more informal, and we put that decision-making process on the mentor to come back to the staff with. But that could be part of that post-licensure audit process, rather than here's your civil penalty and a suspension. Here are the classes, and here, go work with this mentor. Again, because Jeff, it sounds like what a lot of you are concerned with is field work. That would be a perfect place to use mentors in the real world, in field work. Now that would mean that people would need to find a mentor in their local area that's willing to accompany them on inspections, or they would go on that mentor's inspections with them on their work product. We're not providing work product, and we don't compensate mentors. We do imagine that they would like to be compensated. So that's an independent agreement between the mentor and whoever they're mentoring. How much and how often they decide to be compensated, if at all. But that could be a process wherein we do have that, quote, boots on the ground interaction that a supervisor would ordinarily have with a registered trainee. It wouldn't be over the course of a year or a year and a half or whatever, for our licensure side. But it would give another human being a chance to look at that person's field. If the field work is where we've identified it as a problem, it would give that mentor a chance to work with and review the new licensee's field work, and sign off on it and say, yes, this meets my standards. I think that they're okay and can move forward, or that they've passed that post-licensure initial process. So there are things already in place that we can utilize. The question really is more of a bureaucratic one. How do we meld those things into rules without contradicting existing things or appearing to put too many requirements on one side or the other? So yes, the mentorship process could be a thing that we do. Education could be a way that we address that. As far as consequences subsequent to, let's go to the extreme. If we have a person who's, maybe it's not even a PREA graduate. We have a new licensee that was audited on the front end for licensure and took their test and passed their test. And now 10.5 months later, the board has requested them to provide a log of their work product for the last 12 months or since they've been issued their license. We request 3 files. 3 files came up severely lacking in terms of, it's pretty clear that this person doesn't understand ANSI. And they're a residential appraiser doing GSE lending work. That would be a competency thing that they need to address. ANSI is now just a part of that daily appraisal life. So the first thing that we would do would be, here is a class on the National Standards Institute's measurement standards. There you go. That's what you need to know. And then following that up with mentorship involvement on, say, 1, 2, 3, I don't know, pick an arbitrary number of inspections to verify that, okay, that was the piece that this person was missing. A mentor has watched them do the thing, and they verified that, okay, according to the mentor, they are doing the thing correctly. If that doesn't happen in that mentorship process, after classes, after mentorship, that mentor would probably report back to staff, the administrator or an investigator, that we work together and no, this person still doesn't quite have it. At a certain point, there would be a need to escalate things in terms of, all right, well, the classes didn't work. the mentorship didn't work, we could then involve staff in a compliance counseling scenario, or it could result potentially, if it's a severe enough repetitive issue of noncompliance, with an administrator allegation. That would be up to me to bring to the enforcement committee if we've got a person that is repetitively failing to meet the minimum standards and they already have a license. In the current world, if I were to go reactivate today and make a series of errors that threaten the public trust, regardless of whether or not I've had a license for a week or 24 years, I'm subject to the board's authority. So at the point where if we've identified it as a significant repetitive error or failure to meet standards, even after being given additional resources in a way that appears to have worked for others, at that point, I think there would need to be some kind of formal consequence. And that doesn't necessarily mean a revocation or anything serious like that, but involving our disciplinary process at some point very later on, right? We're not talking about initially. If we identify shortcomings, trying to address those shortcomings, just like we do with compliance on the compliance side, education first, education and oversight first. And then if education and oversight don't work, involving more of the appraiser's permanent licensure record, civil penalties, a potential short suspension, some things like that. Again, if it looks like after repeated attempts at correction, the corrections still aren't happening for one reason or another, there again, it's our obligation to protect the public. Part of that can include civil penalties and things like that, actual real world disciplinary consequences, but not to start at that point. Does that make sense?
Makes sense. Annie, we'll throw it over to you. You're still muted, Annie.
After that, I'm trying to remember what I put my hand up for. I think my thing about it is I would not want to create extra work for the board. I would not want to strain resources for the board. Public trust is very important. Whatever thing was put into place, I would want it to be as efficient as possible. So that's really all I'm thinking about. And honestly, that's why I was thinking about, a discussion with the appraiser, because it doesn't involve paperwork and doing something in advance necessarily as much as it is getting immediate reactions, but with a mentor or whatever. So that's all I have to say. I don't know, Chad, you talked my head into a muddle, so I'm just gonna let it go with that.
Annie, I'm sorry. I do have a tendency to do that, don't I? So as far as that front end process to make it non-consequential, but we're trying to verify and double check that the people that have licenses or that are about to have licenses are the ones that are supposed to, that meet the criteria that are going to protect the public. On our current licensure side, with the supervisor trainee process, our experience verification process is the audit. On the PAREA side, PAREA was developed intended to, the PAREA process is supposed to be that experience verification that we as a board complete on the back end after the supervisor training has occurred. PAREA's act, the act of completing those, I think it's between 310, we can ask Scott later if you want, but there's that number of appraisals. There's the practice assignments, as we learned in September. There's the practice assignments, and then there are the 3 final assignments. The board could theoretically request to examine one of those final assignments that were not conducted with the help of their PAREA mentors. That is a work product, right? That is what PAREA says meets the experience requirements. So the board could examine the PAREA work product and verify, because that if it is indeed compliant, that whether or not it's academic, hypothetical appraisal work or not, that work product should have a work file. There should be an appraisal report, and those things should comply with standard 1, standard 2, and the record keeping rule and all the other parts of USPAP that apply. So it might not be reinventing the wheel. It might be, depending on where you folks land or what instructions you want to give me, It might be just as simple as examining one of the 3 PREA appraisals that were completed that gave them that PREA certificate, because when they complete the practical applications and the mentor signs off on the final work product, I don't believe that there's like a written test or anything. The test is the appraisal product, right? So at that point where they successfully complete those final appraisals, they get that certificate. That is essentially the same thing as a supervisor saying, yes, they've completed 1,000 hours of experience, or 1,500 hours of experience, or 3,000 hours of experience. So if we're going to be consistent on an audit standpoint on the front end, without actually probably even modifying any of the rules as it sits today, because the audit is a part of our built-in process, we could examine some of that PREA work product on the front end. Alternatively, on the back end, it could be something as simple as a 3-person interview at some point within the first 6-12 months of the process. There are, again, a lot of ways that we can handle that don't necessarily need to be overly intrusive and aggressive, but again, go to the point of protecting the public. And at least in the short term, while we're still trying to gather data on the effectiveness of PREA, Annie, to your point, last couple of board meetings, what we're right now trying to do is proving a negative, right? We can't prove that things are not a problem by a lack of data. We can prove that there is a problem by aggregating data over time, but until we have that data, it's an uncertainty. And I think the likelihood is somewhat low, but there is an uncertainty in terms of what's the work product going to look like on the back end after they come out of it. So the work product examination on the back end would be one solution. Panel interview, I don't know what you would want to call that, would be another potential solution. Examining one of the PREA appraisal reports on the front end, just like we do with a new licensee that has a supervisor, would again be another one of those things that we could do that is consistent. And I think the PREA program, if I remember from our presentation that we received from Sandy and Dana, there is an element of property inspection and physical characteristics identification. They're given the data that they need to make determinations about, is there an adverse location issue, right? There are hints that are given through that process that replicate, not identically, but it's on some level replicate that the data gathering process that we would call an inspection, right? Without putting feet on the site. So examining that work product could be one way to do it. As I don't want to keep repeating myself, but those are the ways that I see potentially having those safeguards without completely overhauling how we do things, and without massively overwhelming board resources or you board members. Again, I share that concern, Annie, and I do want to make sure that we are protecting the public, but we're not putting ourselves further and further behind because of our overcautiousness. I know that that's kind of an oxymoron. Overcautious may not necessarily be a thing that we should be in state government. Caution is just caution. But to that point, yeah, we can double check, verify front end, back end. There are a lot of ways we can go about that. I would just like to probably have more discussion with individual board members, or anybody that feels like they want to have input can contact me at any point to make suggestions. I can't promise that I will take all of the suggestions, but I'm open to everybody's opinions.
Thank you, Chad. Is there anybody else that wishes to add to as far as the board members, to the discussion on this?
Hey, Jeff, I would.
Yeah, go ahead, Julie.
I wanted to, so I wasn't there at the meeting. I was on the road. But I was looking through the notes from this, and one of the instructors, Thornberry, said the hope is that the recent PREA graduates will utilize the more experienced appraisers for support on various issues after completing the program. So the way I look at this, there's an element in here where the PREA graduate should in some way have somebody they can bounce stuff off of. Okay, so where I think that you and Annie and I had voiced our concerns a couple meetings ago about the fact that there is no boots on the ground experience. There's nobody there to actually teach them. They're learning everything in a classroom. There's nobody there to teach them what it's like to go out to a property and inspect it. What did you say, Jeff? I think you said to smell the house while you're inside of it, so you can get an idea of it. And I think that was what I understood our biggest issue with this program is there's nobody there to do it. And then I'm further reading that as part of this program, it is their hope that you will have somebody that can assist you with that process. So when I first was listening about PAREA and reading about it, like, we're missing that component in this. And I understood that we can adopt PAREA, but we can adopt PAREA with other like factors where we can say, hey, you can go ahead, go through your PAREA. However, before you sit for your license, you need to find a experienced appraiser or mentor that can walk you through what that looks like. And maybe instead of requiring, I don't know what it is for residential, instead of requiring 1,000 hours, you require 500 hours. But why? I don't know why we don't make it like we don't have to have PAREA and that's PAREA only. I understood we could have PAREA plus something. And I think that would make me feel more comfortable as far as adopting this is if there's a contingency here, because I'm listening to what you guys are saying and I'm like, okay, so we're going to pass PAREA and then in a year we're going to go audit somebody, but they've already gone through it. You're not going to be able to take their license away. And so my hesitation has always been, we give somebody something, trying to unwind that is going to be impossible. And as a government worker, I know it's impossible to unwind that. And I don't want us to be put in a position where we're trying to unwind something where we can clearly see somebody is not like where they need to be because they didn't have any on the ground experience. Like, trying to unwind that will be impossible. And I hate to see us walk into this going, oh yeah, well, we can audit them in a year and see how things went and all that kind of stuff. I just know that that's going to be an impossible task. And I hate for us to be the ones that in 5 years, people come back at us and they go, why did you guys even agree to this? And that literally weighs on my mind about adopting this, is having people coming back at us going, boy, this board really screwed up and adopted this thing. And now we have all of this chaos in the appraisal industry. And like, I see the appraisal industry going in a direction that I'm very scared for, because I think we're going to become obsolete if we're not careful. And I don't want that to happen. I actually enjoy appraisal, and I just hate for us to become obsolete in the grand scheme of things. And I think we need to be really careful about what we choose to adopt. And if we can adopt it in part and put a contingency on it, I think we're going to be better. I think people will appreciate us. That's all.
Hey, thank you, Julie. Yeah, I share your concerns. I think all the boards share concerns, and we've been trying to figure out a way to do this prior, and everything that has happened thus far has come to, it's like we can't do, what we want is not what PAREA offers as far as the board goes, as we represent Oregon. And so we're trying to figure out a way to, I'm with you. And I was saying the same thing. Hey, do 1 or 2 or 3 field orders in Oregon. I don't know if you had an opportunity to listen to the YouTube of the meeting, but I did kind of cringe when they said that in the meeting a little bit. They were joking the way they said, go work for AMC or a bank or something to get experience. But I'm like, that was probably the worst thing they could have said, which I see if you read the transcript, you would read it that way. But I don't know how we get people experience with PAREA when the PAREA is designed not to give people experience in the field. The only way I could find a way around this was to propose an option to allow somebody, if we pass PAREA, it doesn't matter what Chad or anybody or the board says, they get their license because they pass that criteria. That's just another function or avenue to get the requirements. So we're trusting that case over our auditing system to do that. Okay, but we can't. And so it's like, now how do we do this with having somebody look at something? And I was the same way, Julie, of let's let somebody else, let them do a walkthrough. And I kind of talked in circles about this a couple meetings and after the meetings of how do we do this? And it starts to become an administrative type of nightmare, I think, for Chad to try and figure out how this would work to try and do it previous. Lastly, if I would add a comment here, is that when I was reading or listening to the Appraisal Institute talk about their stuff, I don't know that we're going to see a quick influx of POREA applicants and licensees, like a huge number. So I think we can kind of dip our toes in and say, okay, we've got 3 or 4, or I'm just throwing out a small number because they didn't have that many relative to the United States and the number of appraisers in the United States. So I thought, okay, if we just break it down, maybe we get 1, 2, or 3 from POREA. That gives us the opportunity to look and get some data on it to see how it works. And then if we had to go back and change, I think we could. But I feel like I don't know how we're going to get there if we don't approve something to allow them to get something. But I share your concerns, Julie. That's exactly why I was trying to think about proposing something that Chad could, within the rules, design something as a motion to cautiously dip our toe in the water. But past that, I'm on the. I was one of the first. I think I was the first, Chad. Not that it matters, tooting my own horn. Of the people, I did one, a mentorship. I think it was the first one that I did a mentorship for the state of Oregon. So I did that here for free, and it was very helpful, and it addressed a lot of what this is. But anyway, I'm gonna. I think if we're done with this, I'd like to go ahead and propose a motion, if I may, which is this. I'd like to see something where basically where we give Chad the option, this is my motion, is to examine the POREA rules and to include some type of requirement that would satisfy us as the boards, our experience with the POREA program, that we can have some type of audit within the 12-month period after they've received their license or certification, that we can audit them. And this is also, by the way, for any new applicant. This doesn't mean just POREA. This is for also anybody that goes to the supervisory traditional program. It's basically we're setting a new milestone, like boom, this is it. And so that's a long motion, but that's my motion, is proposed that we give him the opportunity to do that.
So I thought we already decided that this is already allowed. So how come we're making a motion for it? It's already allowed. Like, we can already do that in the first year, have the audit. So like, I'm not finished with this, Jeff. I actually don't understand, like, why don't we do POREA, but POREA with a contingency that there has to be some kind of on the ground experience with people. Like, literally, I'm reading what Thornberry said, and she is literally saying that they are hoping that POREA graduates utilize more experienced appraisers. So she's basically saying, but like, where do we go from there? Because once you go through POREA and get your license, you don't have to go find somebody to work with. You can go hang your sign on the door and go do it. I'm saying, if they're going to go through POREA, why can't we go ahead and say to them, we're happy that you made it through the program. You bypassed this. You're not going to have to do the required hours, but here is a certain number of hours that you will need to do. Because even POREA, the people that were teaching POREA are saying, we're hoping that you go find somebody that knows what they're doing, because we can't give you that experience, that on the ground experience through this program.
Yeah, 100%. I agree with you. I think we've been going through this, and it ends up being the same thing. It's like the chicken or the egg type of conversation. I know we have Kathy. I'm gonna let you go, and then Owen after her, and so we can keep everybody going. Go ahead, Kathy.
I do think I was probably the last one to raise, but that's okay. So you guys are concerned about the field work, which I get that piece of it. How many hours do you think it would take to satisfy the ability to prove that field work is now successful, right? So, I just recently, last month, had my trainee pass the certification test. He was with me through several years of working that, but his ability to measure a house and do field work was completed within a very short period of time. It didn't take him 500 hours. And Julie, I hear what you're saying with regards to having a number of hours, but I don't think it took him 500 hours to get that field work really covered in being competent and fully able to go out and inspect on his own.
Right, for sure. Raul, I'm going to let you, you had your hand up there. Figure get some legal in here.
Thanks. And we are an open session, so I'm going to be limited in terms of what I indicate. And part of this is going to be a bit of a question to Chad. So you have a general discussion without a lot of specifics in terms of what you're going to be discussing today. You're getting into a lot of details regarding PREA and ensuring that it meets proper standards for public protection of licensee qualifications. My understanding is, and you stated it as a motion, but I think you're asking Chad to kind of explore what the board might be able to look at down the road to adopt that maybe looks at incorporating PREA, but also an element of field experiences. And so I'm not using the most technical terms. You're not making any actual decisions here as a board. So I believe that's what I'm understanding, but I'd like to see what Chad, how he's interpreting this discussion and what he understands to be guidance at this point.
Excellent. Thanks, Raul. So my hope with adding this general discussion agenda item was exactly what's happening without the need for motions. Again, because it's not, we've already got rules that have been proposed that were not carried, right? Those motions did not carry. Following that, we reopened the public comment period. We had the presentation from the Institute. My hope was that you all, exactly as we're doing, would discuss the information that was received from that last meeting and have a back and forth and not necessarily that a motion needs to be made because at this point, what I'm hearing is reservations and potential solutions to those reservations. At this point, I don't require any motions. I don't think you guys need to make any motions. I think essentially what I'm looking for is some clear instruction on, is PREA something that you do want to consider as a board? And if so, do you want me to go back and look at some of the options? And this may not be a quick process. Looking at our existing rules and putting some safeguards in place, it could take the rest of this year to get that dealt with and bring something back to you folks that are an amended version of those rules that were proposed. I believe it was in July that were exposed to the public. So at this point, really what I'm looking for is just some instruction from you board members, not in the form of a motion necessarily, but taking your temperature, so to speak, on, is this a thing that you want me to go back and explore and move forward with developing some language that you all can maybe review at a further board meeting and expose to the rulemaking process? Is this a dead issue? I just kind of wanted some more clarification following that last meeting that we had, because the last meeting, if you'll recall, was not a decision-making meeting. It was just for a study session for you all to learn about PREA. And I've said it a couple of times, but I'll say it again. Anybody that missed that meeting, if you haven't reviewed the YouTube footage, that all of our board meetings and that one in particular, that's on YouTube for the whole thing to be reviewed. So if there are things that weren't answered today or some question marks that still exist and you haven't seen that video, I highly recommend that you go back and watch that before we really have a whole lot more discussion or any kind of a decision making or motion on what PREA should look like or what the problems are, things like that. As far as solutions, the things that I talked about earlier are potential options. They're not the only ones. Some of the ones that were talked about might not be viable, but that's going to take staff research really to deal with that and look into. As far as, and I will say this, as far as requiring a set specific number of additional experience hours of a PAREA applicant versus an appraiser that went through the supervising appraiser process, we cannot have two sets of experience hours dependent on the program that the person went through. I would highly, highly advise against that. Just from a consistency standpoint for licensees to be number one. And if you remember, we've just aligned all of our criteria with the appraisal subcommittee for the exact purpose of being consistent and not having things that exceed the federal criteria. So as far as pre-licensure stuff, we have the experience verification process, and that for the supervisor program looks like an audit of that assistant's work product under their supervisor. If we want to apply that to the PAREA program on the front end, that could involve examining the appraisals that were done for PAREA. After the fact, if we want to have another examination 3-4 months later or a month later, I don't care what the time period is, that would be another criteria that we can add in there across the board that would work. There could be potentially mentorship because, again, as of right now, our assistants have supervisors that are overseeing their work product. On the PAREA side, that's essentially the mentor. That's why I brought the mentors in Oregon up. We do have a list of Oregon appraisers, and any appraisers that are on this call or in this meeting right now that are not currently mentors, but would like to consider providing that service to new licensees, regardless of whether they're PAREA graduates or traditional supervisor trainee licensees. We are always looking for mentors that have, in your local markets that know what you're doing and have been there for a while. We have a shortage of those mentors in the lower population areas like Klamath Falls, Eastern Oregon, Prineville, Central Oregon. We have a few more in Central Oregon, just with Bend being as large and growing as it is. But we are in need of more mentors. So that would be just a plug from my side. If you want to be a mentor, please do reach out to me. But in terms of Raul's question to me, I'm not looking for any motions necessarily today. I don't control board decisions, but I don't need anybody to make a motion for me to go back to looking at rules and see and spitballing ways that we could potentially incorporate this program into our existing criteria for licensure without overhauling every single rule that we have or adding an undue burden on the board or licensees, things like that. And again, we don't need motions for that. That can just be instructions at this point.
Thank you, Chad. Owen, you are up, sir, with your hand.
Administratively, Jeff made a motion. Do we need to do anything about that at this point, or are we in discussion of that motion?
I'm going to withdraw my motion. I withdraw my motion.
Okay, so then we do not need a motion to use the power that exists to amongst this board to facilitate some sort of an audit in the first year. We need to make an agreement to do so. Is that what I'm hearing, Chad?
I don't know that there even needs to be an agreement at this point. I'd say where we're at now is let me look at the rules, the way that they're structured, and see if there even needs to be anything added to make that clear in terms of requirements.
And I maintain, and I'll this may be this is a hill that I don't necessarily want to die on, but I agree with Julie's sentiment that I'm concerned about what the profession looks like 5 years from now, and I'm motivated by some of the oral testimony that we heard in our public sessions relating to, and Chad brought up K Falls, and I believe that's exactly where our the appraiser that called in was from. The issue to me here is, one, we have lack of consistency of training, but two, we have lack of availability of training, and that certainly impinges upon our ability to train appraiser or our ability to oversee the training of appraisers in those lower population areas. And if we don't do something about that, I think that we are heading for trouble, if not socially, legislatively in this state. We've seen that before with a lack of service providers. That's part of why I'm even talking to us here today. So I don't think that doing nothing is a prudent path forward. We have an opportunity here to facilitate something that can get training to areas that we currently don't see very well served. And I love the idea of using existing powers of this board to follow up with all new licensees. I think that's a wonderful idea, despite my concern about a lack of consequence. And from what I, not to put word in Julie's mouth, I think she shares that concern about a lack of consequences that result from that. But even just following up without some sort of a consequence, I think is a fabulous idea. So thank you for that, Jeff. I don't have any motion to make.
Okay, that sounds great. Let's see, we've got Annie here.
Oh, I just wanted to say I had an idea, and I love that expression. This is not a hill I want to die on. But I think that when you're appraising, anybody who's appraising has to travel a little bit, right? We all kind of drive around a lot in our cars. And one option that I was thinking of would be to have a newly licensed appraiser agree, and I don't know if this is legal, if we can do this, is to have them go and accompany an experienced appraiser, maybe one with a sort of supervisory license, even if they're not supervising anyone, to accompany them on their inspection, which would be not that they have to come up with an assignment that the new licensee is doing themselves, but just say, okay, I've got, I'm in K Falls, I got to go over to Medford today to accompany this experienced appraiser, Jeff, let's say, on his inspection, and that is something that would be assigned to that experienced appraiser, so that that would be part of their responsibility to the profession, would be, I'm going to have this person come with me on my inspection, of course, with certain agreements towards confidentiality and whatever we would need to do. It's just an idea. Yeah, post-license or pre, I think it could be either, right? Whatever would work administratively. But I think there's ways that, I have a supervisor license. I don't have time to supervise somebody. But if somebody said, hey, I need to come and do a mentored inspection with you, when is your next inspection? I could say, well, I've got something I'm doing next week. And then they come to me and we do an inspection. Is that a terrible idea? Is that something that would help work to fill this gap?
That's a fantastic idea, in my opinion. I think that also hits what Julie has spoken upon, even Owen, which is, and my fear, which is, if we do that, that would probably have to be before any license is given. Granted, that would be the supervisor or PREA. Hey, once you apply, you have to have a supervisory appraiser or somebody that Chad, the state might say, could go do a inspection with, and then sign off 1 or 2 inspections. It doesn't have to be the same person. And that would be before they even can take get their license by the state. Chad, that would be on you as far as rules, but we want to be consistent, correct, between a supervisor, that type traditional method, and PREA. So it would have to be both.
Herein lies the only challenge I see with that. I don't mean to cut anybody off. Currently, I don't know if you're aware of this, we don't have that requirement for supervisor trainees. I could theoretically work for you, Jeff, never, ever, ever do an inspection, write and contribute to all of the reports that you're doing, to have you sign those reports, develop 1,000 hours of experience, and become state licensed within 6 months. There is no requirement for a trainee, as the traditional supervisor trainee, to participate in inspections. We say within our criteria that the appraiser must obtain experience in all categories, and that we've got those identified A through H in our administrative rules. One of those categories is problem identification and property research, right? So that front end property research, most of us take that to mean the inspection process, but we don't specifically call out property inspection as a criteria for our existing licensing rule. So that would be the challenge to do that on the front end. To say we would like someone to work with a mentor following the application process and submittal of their PAREA certificate in lieu of an experience log, which is what we're talking about, right? The experience log is replaced by a certificate that says this person developed the same or an equivalent experience as they would going through these number of hours with a supervisor. They just did it through the PAREA program. So in light of that, we could, and again, I'll go back to, if it's pre-licensure, we could request 3 files that they completed through PAREA to examine. We could potentially identify that application process, because the supervisor trainee process includes a person that's signing off on that person's work as a supervisor. We could incorporate a mentorship process on the front end where potentially, like Anna, like you were saying, they could accompany that mentor, not a supervisor, but that mentor could verify their experience in terms of the property identification, problem identification, and property research, rather than calling it inspection. But that is another option potentially on the front end, where that would be, the onus would be on the applicant to make sure that they can, whether they need to drive to Eugene from Klamath Falls, or drive to Portland from Salem, or, insert geographic location here, that could be a part of their obligation, that they want to be a part of the profession. These are the criteria that we need to make sure, at least in the short term, that we're doing the job of protecting the public, but also making that program available, so that, again, we're serving the entire Oregon public, which includes appraisers. So front end versus back end, and requiring X number of hours, or specifically identifying property inspection, and you must be accompanied by it, et cetera, et cetera. I do see some challenges there as far as it goes, fitting those into rules without modifying the rules across the board for everyone. So if we're going to say you have to go on inspections, we need to say that for trainees as well, before we approve them to take their exam. And as a matter of course, right now, I think most of the residential trainees absolutely, I would say that there's a very low likelihood that a supervisor trainee relationship doesn't already include that inspection process. But we don't have anything in the rules that says you have to inspect property in order to be approved to take your exam.
Lori, did you have anything? You removed your hand, did you?
Well, no, I mean, Chad kind of already said what, in my experience, there are disciplines that do not require a property inspection. And so I'm just concerned, especially with the way that things are moving in our profession, away from appraisers performing property inspections. I think that there's an awful lot of focus on that, that we really need to consider. So.
Thank you, Lori. Chad, I think I'm getting a sense here of what the board is where we're leaning, which is this. Our Constitution has 27 amendments, so we can make an amendment to our rules and guidelines. So as a thought, please explore this as a rule, which is we make everybody have to have required inspections. This is from the supervisory, so that even though we're pretty sure it's high likelihood that somebody that's gone through a 2-year process with a supervisor has never seen a house, let's just put that, see if we can't make a rule about that they have to have in the line some experience of that. And then we can also then tack that with PAREA or any new licensee, doesn't matter what they have, getting their license. With the supervisor, of course, that would be signed off. With PAREA, then it would be somebody like a mentor that's not doing an audit, that just is walking with them to do that. Between the entire board, we're not going to sit here and decide it's going to be 5 inspections, 50 inspections, but let's just, can you get to that with Raul? And I think we're going to need to make a rule change to do that, if we're going to add PAREA into this, to move this forward. And then Kathy, go ahead. Kathy?
Sorry, I just wanted to make sure that we're not backstepping, right? We've already changed the rules to align with national rules, right? By now, I just want to make sure that if we go back and we say, okay, now for all appraisers that are getting their licensures, they're going to require inspections, that we're not going to have to rewrite all of our rules and go back, and we're basically backpedaling in order to approve something that, to Lori's point, may not have as big of an impact on our profession down the road as we might be making it to be by requiring this. Mm-hmm. Just a comment. We don't have to have further conversation about it. Just a comment.
Okay, thank you, Kathy. As far as I'm going to ask you to look into that, Chad, for rules, see what's required. Maybe we don't have to backtrack. I'm not, because we didn't pass PREA already, so we're still kind of in that. You had to go back and relook at that anyway. Can we look at this? The feeling I'm getting from the board is we'd like to have some type of experience. What we have from you, you're saying it has to be administratively the same, be it the traditional method or PREA. Okay. I'm getting a feeling that the board's like, hey, we don't want to give them the license and then try and snatch it back from them, because it's a logistical nightmare or government nightmare. I've never worked for the government, but I understand that it could be that. So a few of the board is saying, let's try and do it before. So pass PREA, pass your whole audit exam, but before you get your piece of paper, somebody's going to have to go with you on a couple of houses. What that number is, I don't know. Let's let the board decide. But can you look at that, and we can look at that the next meeting?
I'm happy to explore that. Yeah, and it is going to take some time, just given that we're at the close to the end of October, coming into the holiday season and things like that. But yeah, between now and January, I'm absolutely happy to look at what we've got an existing rule, and where something like that could fit in for new licensees as maybe part of the application process, as opposed to calling it experience, because we've said that the appraisers that are applying currently with the current methodology, they've met the experience requirements. PREA is meant to satisfy the experience requirements, but in terms of, in addition to those things saying they satisfied their experience requirements, an inspection of with a mentor, and that mentor could be a supervisor or maybe not. Yes, I'm happy to explore the options that we can, just to verify that they have physical real world experience, or not necessarily experience, but this minimum set of skills and competency for a property inspection process.
Sure. Annie, go ahead.
That would be backpedaling somewhat. That would be a little bit of a backpedal in terms of disaligning our criteria with the federal requirements. But I think in light of the fact that it's with the intent to allow this additional program to exist, I think we can justify why that's occurring, as long as we're not adding a huge burden of additional responsibilities on all of our applicants that didn't previously exist. And I think that's probably fairly reasonable. I don't know how that looks at this moment as far as where that's going to fit or how it's going to look, but I'm happy to start working on that for all of you. Yeah.
Perfect, Chad. Annie, go ahead.
Yeah, it's not as bad of a backpedal as it would be if we passed PREA and then did this. So this is actually the time to do it. The other thing I think would be helpful is if there was a way to make it a bit of a carrot for experienced appraisers, that if they agree to take somebody on one of their inspections with them, that they get, like an hour of continuing, or something towards their licensing renewal, or do you know what I mean? Like some sort of.
We do currently have it in
service hour thing.
We do have, and this again, now this is going into the weeds a little bit, but as of right now, in terms of continuing education credit, instructors do receive continuing ed credit for instructing a course, for writing a course, things like that. There could be within those education rules a place for, in addition to writing a course or teaching a course, participating in the board's mentorship program with a new licensee or prospective licensee could result in, say, 2 hours of continuing ed credit.
Just on a one-off basis, just like on a one-off basis, like I just, get an hour.
The verification process to say that, yes, we verified that person did that and we can give them that credit. There again, that's getting into the weeds of the where and the how and the why. But these are all really good ideas in terms of solutions that don't require a complete overhaul of every requirement and re-examining or reimagining of our appraiser licensing process, yeah, that would be a carrot that we could potentially offer. I don't know exactly how that looks, but again, that's one of the things I'm happy to look at. Sure.
Okay, fantastic. Hey, this has been a lively discussion again. Thank you all for, we've kept it civil. Professional might be the best word. Annie, are you done talking? Your hand's still up. Did you have anything else?
No, I will put my hand down now. Thank you.
Oh, no problem at all. Board, thank you so much for your time today. I think we've got Chad going the right way. Before we cancel, Kathy, I'll get to you in just a minute. I think we've got him with some direction here of what we want. It sounds like as a group, we'd like the pre type of thing, Chad. So if you'll look into that, figure that out. I think we're kind of leaning in that direction. So I think we all have the same purpose in mind, which is protect the public, not backtrack. Make sure that we don't do something that we have to unwind later, and we're all just right there. So with that being said, I'm going to let Kathy finish this up here.
So I just had, before we close out the meeting, I had two other just really quick things that I wanted to bring for new discussion to the board. I don't know if this is the time to do it or not. Okay, so the first thing that I have considered is I get engagement letters all the time where there's requirements by certain states to have the AMC fee and the appraisal fee noted specifically in the appraisal report. And we currently don't have any rules or regulations regarding that. And I wanted to just bring that to the board for discussion. Some states have where they have to somewhere in the report state what the AMC fee. And I think that this is for transparency across the board, right? There's a lot of homeowners that have no idea that AMCs are getting a chunk of money. And it depends on the AMC, right? Some AMCs are a cost plus, and so they don't get a whole lot. There's some AMCs that are taking more than 50% of the appraisal fee, and the homeowner has no idea. I personally have received phone calls from homeowners chewing me out because I've gotten paid so much for an appraisal where I haven't even gotten close to what they paid for the appraisal. So I just wanted to bring that to the board for a point of discussion of, can we move forward with some type of discussion with regards to having some type of rules where that's a requirement in our appraisal reports. That was the first one. The second one, whoops, let me get to my notes here. So I had a conversation with John Brennan at the Appraisal Summit about the grant money. And I know we've got the grant money right now that is moving forward with regards to helping out with the compliance issues and stuff like that. But I asked John if that grant money from the ASC could be used to stipend supervisors. And he said that he didn't see any reason why a state could not set up some type of a grant option or opportunity to stipend a supervisor for being a supervisor. That's one of the biggest things I hear for supervisors as to why they do not supervise, is because it takes up too much of their time. They lose money doing that. But if they had some type of an opportunity where the state has a program, they've gotten grant money from the ASC, that specifically on the ASC website, it states that that money can be used for this type of a purpose, but the state would have to set it up and run that program. So yes, it may look like a big daunting thing, but it might be another path to say, hey, people out there that are good supervisors, but you're not willing to supervise because we know it's going to cost you money to do it. If the state has grant money to stipend you on that, would you be willing to do it? So that was the second piece that I just wanted to bring for discussion.
Those seem more directed toward Chad for sure, as far as the directing of money and everything else. So, and also the requirement with that, Kathy, I have seen that. I get that same type of complaint as far as sometimes with homeowners saying, oh, whoa, these fees. And yeah. But go ahead, Chad, what can we do?
Okay, so as of right now in statute, ORS 6742, Lori might have a better idea of the exact reference of the statutory numbering. There is a prohibition against AMCs prohibiting disclosure of appraisal fees inside the appraisal. But that's, to Kathy's point, That's not the same thing as saying we require appraisers to disclose the fee that they were paid within the appraisal report. Without going back to the legislature and that very time-consuming and costly process on that side, we do have the ability potentially, there's somewhere possibly within the scope of practice and procedures section of our administrative rules that I could look at in terms of, in addition to, we already have a requirement that if an appraiser receives significant real property appraisal assistance, that they must disclose that within their appraisal report. That requirement lives in administrative rule. So we could look at the administrative rules and potentially include a requirement that the appraisal report must, maybe we could say it, clearly and conspicuously disclose the appraisal fee paid to the appraiser. Because the appraiser may not always have the knowledge of what the AMC collected, but they know what they're getting paid, right? And as of right now, we communicate that generally through invoices to our clients, which at least in the past when I wrote appraisals, that's where I communicated my fee. I didn't necessarily talk about it in my narrative addendum as a disclosure item. It was just an invoice item, and the invoice is not necessarily part of the appraisal. So there could be, in addition to administrative rules, it says in the appraisal report itself, and I'm not going to make wording, this isn't specific wording, but some kind of a requirement that in the appraisal report itself, the appraiser must disclose the fee that they received for the assignment. Existing rules state that you must disclose if you received a thing of value in exchange for the assignment. So that's not quite the same thing as a fee, but that's if I went to appraise somebody's house and they gave me 5 pounds of smoked salmon from Alaska, right? That's a thing of value potentially that I was given because I went there to do that appraisal. That's not necessarily part of that appraisal fee, but we could have an additional administrative rule in there that addresses disclosure on the appraiser side of the appraiser's fee that they received for that assignment. That is potentially something we can do. The other issue being stipends for supervisors. That if we could guarantee that the appraisal subcommittee was going to grant us money in perpetuity every year, and that we knew what that was going to be and how many years we would have that for, that probably wouldn't be the worst idea in the world. As it stands, there is no guarantee that even though we got this appraisal subcommittee grant this year, there's no guarantee that we'll get it next year. And if we write it into our administrative rules that supervisors may apply for and receive a stipend from the board, remember, we're not a general fund agency. We do not have access to the Oregon State coffers. Licensing fees, which are on the current decline, are the only things that support this board's operations, which as of right now, we're not necessarily in the green. So if we take those circumstances, project forward a potential continuing decline in populations of appraisers and the uncertainty of maybe not receiving a grant at some point in the next 3 to 5 years, we've now obligated ourselves to pay supervisors money that we don't have. And so then we're going to be in really serious trouble. So that would be my only caution as far as compensating supervisors on a stipend. In terms of the mentorship process, the way that we do our mentorships with, again, right now through compliance cases, we anticipate that those mentors are going to want to be compensated for working with people that have been through our compliance process. And Jeff, just like you said, you chose to do that free of charge to the person that went through and learned from you. That's not a requirement that it be free of charge. We kind of anticipate that the mentor is going to know where they stand on that and what they're willing to accept, and work with the person that they're mentoring on, do I get a fee? What's the reasonable cost for my time? Is there a cost for my time? Those kinds of things. Voluntarily compensating supervisors from our position in the board, I think, is a danger. I think it's a great idea, and if we had an unlimited source of funds, I would absolutely be in favor of that. But as it stands right now, I can't recommend that as a really great idea. I think it's a great idea in practice, in concept, but in putting it into practice, looking at our current numbers right now, that would be putting the board in jeopardy.
Thank you, sir. Owen, you've got your hand up.
Very briefly, and this may be a difference in perspective, but to Kathy's question about requiring appraisers to disclose fees in appraisal reports, in my experience with commercial firms that operate on a national basis, we spent a lot of money on bidding strategy, and I cannot support the idea of being required to include appraisal fees paid to that firm because that really is proprietary business strategy information.
I would agree.
Yeah, I think wasn't it we require what the AMC fee was paid, but not really what the appraiser fee. But it might be something, I don't know.
Maybe there's a place where we could, well, again, this would potentially have to go back into legislature if we're going to put it into the AMC side of the statute. But requiring that the AMC disclose to their client the portion of the fee that they received, or it's that could be a complicated issue to look into as far as making any changes, but certainly not the worst idea. Transparency, any item of transparency is a great idea, but again, to Owen's point, that could create some unforeseen issues on the non-residential side. As a residential appraiser, I don't personally see a problem. Again, and this is just my personal opinion, I would have no potential problem disclosing the fee that I was paid in a residential appraisal to a client, whether it's an attorney, whether it's it wouldn't even necessarily be the client. It would be a reader of the report would be able to see what I was paid. That really being relevant only in the context of AMCs and residential work, because there is such a widespread difference in what those AMC agreements look like between appraisers and the engagement letters. Some of them are much higher than others in terms of the fee split that the AMC receives. Some AMCs basically include their operating cost plus, right? But how we regulate that as a state agency, trying to regulate that private business aspect of it, is challenging. But those are both reasonable ideas. I see some dangers with both.
Lori, we'll get to you, then Kathy, and then we're going to probably want to try and wrap this up.
Yeah, now we're getting a little past time. Yeah, Kev, I think I hear what you're saying, and I think it's a great idea. I do think we'd have to go back to the legislature in order to make it a requirement. The other thing that I would caution the board about, because we've seen this in other states, is when you make that requirement, it's a requirement on the appraiser. So the appraiser is the only one that can get in trouble if it doesn't get done. Let's say you forget to do it and it's an Oregon statute, then it's the appraiser that gets into trouble. That's not, I don't think that was ever really the intent. So anyway, just wanted to throw that out as a cautionary tale.
Thank you very much, Kathy. Oh, go ahead, Chad.
One quick thought. I'm sorry, just brainstorming here. Instead of obligating the appraiser to report things, we could potentially add administrative rules in terms of the AMC side that they must disclose to the appraiser what portion of the fee they're receiving or what their compensation is. I might want to check with the Department of Justice on that and see if that is a thing that we can do. I don't know the answer to that right now, but in terms of rather than putting the onus on the appraiser to gather and report that information, at least allowing them access to that information and saying that the company that's engaging them has to tell them, right, what is the total fee that you're charging your client? And then by the simple math, what the fee is that you're getting, right? And that in terms of transparency and knowledge to the appraiser, and then the appraiser would have the ability, without being required to disclose, that I'm going to disclose what I was paid and I'm going to disclose the total. I'm choosing to disclose those things in the report as opposed to being obligated to. But the AMC on that side being required to inform the appraiser via transparency. Well, we charged, and I know that this probably doesn't occur. We charged the client $6,000 for the residential appraisal. We paid the appraiser $650, right? That would be information that personally I would want to know as the appraiser. I don't think that's occurring, but that, and it's a massively hyperbolic example, but that would be one of those things, right? That might be useful information for the appraiser to have, and for them to put in their appraisal report that, hey, listen, here was my fee, here was the total, but not making it an obligation on the reporting side for the appraiser so that they're not held accountable if an AMC does not give them that information.
Kathy, sorry, go ahead, please.
That's okay. I was just going to say thank you to the additional commentary. I hadn't thought through the whole commercial side of it, and so I appreciate you guys' comments with regards to that. And Lori's comment about the unintended consequences of that as well. I do think that perspective is really important to me. So thank you.
You got I think we're done, Chad. I think it's probably time to make a motion to go ahead and conclude the meeting. Oh, I lost his picture there.
Oh, there we go. Sorry about that, guys. Yeah, my whole screen just decided to quit for a second. Yeah, I have nothing else for you folks. So anybody that wants to make a motion to adjourn, Jeff, you're running the show here. That would be up to you.
I will make a motion to adjourn the meeting. I think we've covered a lot of ground today.
I'll move to adjourn.
I guess Stephanie will take a vote.
Yes. Jeff?
Yes.
Lori?
Yes.
Julie?
Yes.
Annie?
Yes.
Ed?
Yes.
Kathy?
Yes.
And Owen?
Yes.
The meeting now is adjourned. Is that how we go?
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you,
so much,
guys.
folks.
Thank
Happy
you.
Monday.